Welcome to this supplemental episode of Tape Deck Tales. We will be bringing you a full episode later in the month when we have all our members. Real quick, let me introduce the topic and introduce my panelists, and then I'll get talking. Today we're going to talk about the arcades, kind of supplementing the January episode of what we are missing from Generation X. Joining me to my left is Michelle. She's been with us for episodes 1 and 2. And we have a new panelist tonight down on the lower part of the screen, Eric from Good Guy Productions. All right, the arcade. Now, before I get into this, I want to preface, I know there are still arcades. In fact, in Rochester, New York, at the Museum of Play, they have a wonderful section where you can go in and still play coin-operated games. And I know that in our mall, where I live, there is a little arcade here, but it's not the same as it was growing up. What we are missing is the way the arcades were when we were kids. We don't miss the arcade because the games are better. We miss it because life felt simpler the moment we walked in. The second those doors open, it hit you. The lights, the noise, the chaos, every machine yelling for your attention. Pac-Man chomping on one corner. Street Fighter trash talking in another. The floor sticky with soda. The air thick with popcorn and pizza grease. And somehow, it was perfect. You didn't need updates. You didn't need downloads. You didn't need an internet connection. All you needed was a couple of quarters and maybe a friend willing to spot you one more game. Back then, winning actually meant something. Your initials on the high screen scoreboard weren't just letters, they were proof that you were somebody. If you beat the boss, people watched. If you lost, you learned. And when someone stepped up to challenge you, it wasn't online trash talk, it was eye contact, elbows on the cabinet, and pride on the line. We missed the arcade because it was one of the last places where everyone was present. No phones, no scrolling, no distractions, just you, the machine, and the clock running out on your last quarter. And maybe that's the real reason it hurts. The arcade didn't just take our money, it took our time, our focus, and our attention, and gave us memories back. We didn't know it then, but those blinking lights were the soundtrack of being young. And every time we hear that startup chime in our head, we're really just wishing we could hit continue one more time. Now, Eric, you and I grew up in the same general area, and it wasn't like there was an arcade on every corner in our area, but we did have the chance to have a certain semblance or maybe drive a little bit to get to them. But what are your thoughts? What are your memories of the arcade?
We talked for an hour about this, and I'd love to pull in Mike Kinville as our panelist on our next time you hit this discussion because his dad was the person who had the forethought to open up a place where all the kids could get together and just hang out and play these games. So when I grew up in an era where the first game, I mean, I literally experienced Pong, right? So everybody wanted the little Pong. I think it was Konami who made that thing, and everybody wanted that. Then it graduated to the little desktop games, which were like Space Invaders, right? And I remember I had been probably 14, and that was like on the top of my list to get that Space Invaders game. And when I did get it on Christmas, that was big thing. So as we get a little bit older, you go to in our town we had a roller skating rink. In the roller skating rink, there was a little arcade section in the back, as well as I guess the arcade games of what our parents played. There was pool back there. There were foosball tables, probably a ping pong table, and that was at the roller skating rink. So as we graduated on, I have relegated myself to going to casinos where it's almost like the continuation of the video games that we played as a kid, the flashing lights, as you mentioned. But there, at least you got a chance to win a couple bucks back. But to digress back to what I was saying about Kinville's arcade, and I'm thinking that that's probably where you experienced your first foray into the video games as well. I didn't get it to the online section where people are playing against each other with headsets on and like they do these days, or on this thing where that's all they do is just stare at a little tiny screen. It was a place where you socialized and everybody got together and hung out, after school or on the weekend. And so I think that the kids these days, by doing it online, which it is pretty cool, where you can connect with kids all across the country, but you're still pretty much sitting by yourself. And I think that is maybe a little bit of what you were hitting on, what our society now is missing.
Yeah, Michelle, what about you? You didn't grow up in the same area we did, obviously. So, how is it different for you from where you're from?
Well, I would say it's like, we used to go to the Roller Dome as well, and that's the only place that I would actually be able to play the arcade because it was up in the mall, and my parents didn't really take us there much. So, whenever we went roller skating, you always got to play Pac-Man, any arcade games, pool, foosball. That's not really a arcade game, but I think my favorite was always like some kind of pinball games. Uh, I was not really. That was the only time I got to experience it until I was older, and then of course my kids all want to go to it all the time and spend money.
What are some memory a game that you might have spent way too much time and money on?
I'll go first if you want.
Okay, go ahead.
I think if you looked at my palm, centipede. I like ripped the skin off my palm trying to use that trackball, that roller ball. That's definitely a memory.
What about you, Michelle?
Oh, Tetris. I couldn't stop playing Tetris.
That was a different kind of game, wasn't it? Where
Yeah.
Mhm.
little thinking as well. Yeah, that was very addictive.
So
Ah,
at the Burger King that I worked at in Saranac Lake, they had for a time Cruisin' USA. And for whatever reason, that one, so this is 90s now, that one really sticks out as something that me and the guys that I work with, Richie and Matt, and just playing that game for hours and trying to one up each other and get our initials or inappropriate words that we might have used instead of the initials.
I was gonna ask you
In the
that
place
question. Like,
yep.
yeah, in the place, the high scoreboard, we had to be the best on our break, even to the point where, like I shared rides with my brother, and if one of us was on a different shift, then the other one was out playing the game while we were waiting for the sibling to be done work before we could go home. Cruising USA to me, and that was I didn't have the system that it came on, the Nintendo 64. Recently, I got myself a copy for my Nintendo 64 now as an adult, but if I could turn my camera around someday, I might show that all the systems are currently hooked up to my TV. So, video game is definitely a big part of not only me growing up, but as a almost 50-year-old man now, still have the Atari, the Nintendo. They're all hooked up.
yeah,
But yeah,
Pitfall.
Cruising USA was definitely one. When I got to college, it kind of got away from that and actually ended up in the pool hall more often than an arcade. But in high school, it was definitely a fun time to waste on a afternoon after work for school.
Mhm.
I don't think you heard my question. Did you have the game Pitfall?
Yes,
Where
Pitfall was
That
one of
too.
those that we in our original Atari we borrowed, I think, and then didn't have for years. And years later, in the early 2000s, when I started recollecting, I definitely not only Pitfall but Pitfall 2, Pitfall for the Super Nintendo, Pitfall for the PlayStation. So these are updated versions.
know that
Yeah.
existed. Yeah.
In fact, the Pitfall for the PlayStation has a secret level where if you go down this one tree, you end up in the Atari game.
What?
Yeah, it's a nice little Easter egg that they threw in
Really
there in I think it's called Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure for the PlayStation 1. It's a nice little Easter egg they threw in there.
cool.
Yep.
That is cool.
Yeah.
They go in and they give a backstory more, and then the Atari character of Pitfall actually becomes at the end of the game. He's the father of Pitfall Harry Jr. that you're playing as in the PlayStation game. So it kind of brings it, you know, into canon that yeah, that little 4-bit character, he was real in this universe. Um, you said
All those
brought up, you
Atari
said
games.
Pong. You said
Yeah.
Pong. That's another one that obviously started the home video console movement. And obviously, I'm the next generation. Atari 2600 was our first home video game console.
We had, I mean, for that one was Yar's Revenge, I think Asteroids, Missile Command.
Yep.
Donkey Kong come out of that? No, that was Nintendo,
Don
wasn't it?
Coleco put out a version for the Atari 2600. Coleco,
Okay.
they had their own system, but they were also back then it was like the Wild Wild West. Anybody could produce games for the Atari 2600 because the Atari didn't have the software or the hardware to break it. There's actually some X-rated games that exist for the Atari 2600, and which is weird. Bachelor and Bachelorette and Custer's Last Stand, which really is weird. Not going
Brings
to get
new
into that.
thoughts of the joystick.
Yeah. But yeah, Coleco had a version of Donkey Kong, and of course Mario made his debut as
Mhm.
Mario Brothers. This one-screen board where you're either Mario or two-player mode was a different colored Mario. It wasn't yet Luigi, but as you're trying to get up and collect points, and before Mario became well, actually, I think Mario was first the villain in Donkey Kong, and then he got his own game. But he wasn't even. I don't even think he was
Oh,
called Mario at that time. He was Jumpman.
I've always known him as Mario.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm old now too, though. Talking
All
about
right.
Pong,
So
you know I'm old.
yeah. So in closing, one last thing I would say is, what is your worst experience with an arcade game?
Hmm.
Michelle, you get to start this time because Eric went first on the other one.
Losing my quarters.
You know what? Let's expand on that. You're so
You know.
close, and then you're playing. Let me think of something. I don't even like Terminator, and you're so close to getting that next level, and you have no more quarters left. That's awful.
Oh, that
That's
too.
terrible.
And,
Yeah.
like sometimes we'd put quarters in and then like nothing would happen. You're like shaking the thing, but what's the worst? Like I used to play Pac-Man all the time and I hated losing, but after a while you just had to quit because it was like the ghost would get you.
So for
People
me,
I don't
it
really
people
have
was
a
do that
bad
exact
story.
pattern, right? They
yeah.
just use the entire
Yes.
pattern. You're like, how did you do that?
And it's yeah, all the same.
For me, I think it would be like in a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat type game, thinking I'm all big and bad in that, and I'm 13, 14 years old, and I just got absolutely pounded by an 8-year-old. He whatever he knew the buttons mashing because that's what those
Mm.
fighting games were button smashing. He knew how to button mash better than I did, and it was a kid that my mom was babysitting, and he just I don't know. It's one of those things where you think you should win because you're older, and nope.
How many
So
times you
later
walk
this
out of
month,
there sweaty from that? You
yep,
know, you work so hard.
yep. Later this month, we'll be bringing you another episode of Tape Deck Tales. I've got a little vacation to go on first, but before then, enjoy this. And what are your thoughts of the arcade? Comment below, and as always, like, share, and subscribe.